God. Did you guys hear about that girl? Her name's Jessica Collins. So, like, check it. And, like 2019, I think she drops this video saying that she was an Epstein victim and she was gonna, like, you know, report um, her experiences and name names, right? And she says in this video, if I go missing, just know I don't want to go missing. It's because I'm a victim. And then in 2025, in September, she's on this Carnival Cruise Lines, right? And she like tips her maid, says thanks, goes ashore. And then, like a little while later, the cruise line gets this text saying, I'm fine, don't worry about me. And everybody's like, where the hell did Jessica Collins go? And she was like legit missing. And then this newspaper news, I don't know, 721 News comes out and says, oh, no, she's found, she's safe, she was just stopped by immigration. That kind of makes you think, like, okay, was she really? But it made me think of like Paolo Zampoli and how he was using immigration against his baby mama in a custody battle. Um, yeah. Anyway, that's not what this video is about. Today on Gigi Says What Now, we are going to continue to follow the money and look into the finances and how this world that we're finding in the in the Jeffrey Epstein files kind of works. Um, so what have we learned already? So we learned that if we just listen to people like the Karen Mulders and the Corey Feldmans and the Rose McGowans and the Sinead O'Connors of the world, maybe this fuck shit could have ended a long time ago. But we don't. We don't listen to victims. And we just let the people in power exploit them and abuse them and destroy their careers when they try to get justice. And it's not, they go to and report to authorities and nothing happens. Nothing happens. Not because the criminal justice system is broken, but because the criminal justice system is working exactly the way it was intended. And we already know this, right? We've known this. So then we learned that in the art connection, we learned that MBS probably paid DJT in the realm of $400 million to support a ceasefire in Yemen. We've learned that this stuff is worldwide. We go to Australia, and then, I mean, you look at the different things that different people have been saying. This type of crazy stuff has been going on for many, many decades, probably going back to Ford, around the world. And it's not all one circle, right? Like Nickelodeon didn't have anything to do with Jeffrey Epstein, but they were still, you know, abusing their stars. We look at people like Britney Spears and Amanda Bynes, and as consumers of their work, we think, oh, they've gone off the rocker. Well, why? We need to learn to recognize trauma responses, and we need to learn to listen to the victims, because the criminal justice system isn't going to give them any justice. But these people, they get their money that gives them their power from us, from the consumers. We don't need to watch a Miramax film. We don't need to buy a t-shirt from Abercrombie & Fitch. We don't need to get our underwear from Victoria's Secret. There are other places that we can go once these things come out. Just like in California, where the Democrat uh, is facing accusations. And guess what? Public pressure made him step down. He's not going to be a legislator any fucking more. And that's the power we have as the people. And anyway, I think that's why it's important to keep Jeffrey Epstein in particular on the tips of our tongues and keep paying attention, um, because it's not just Jeffrey Epstein. Someone else is doing this too, right? And we need to hopefully change. Hopefully, this can be the catalyst for change on a social level, so that there is some sort of social justice, so that we can do something as a society to protect our children. Because this is young women, it's young men, it's children, men and girls and boys, and yeah. So anyway, we learned that with the Australia connection. And then we started to just kind of follow the money, follow the finances, because this is something that nobody's talking about. And what we're finding in the files is not only is it geopolitical as well as crimes against humanity, there are also accusations, a lot of accusations of financial crimes. And that's what I'm kind of going down. I'm just doing a general deep dive into the people that are mentioned within the files, and how they're connected to each other and what kind of accusations they have in regarding to finance. Last video, we talked a lot about Howard Lutnick, mostly Cantor Fitzgerald and BGC Group, and their accusations that they were using the Charity Day events, where the money was supposed to go to the survivors of the victims of 9/11, as a possible Ponzi scheme, fraud, and money laundering. And that was the accusations there. Today, we are going to look into another accusation. And unlike the Cantor Fitzgerald accusation, which seemed to come from a more credible source, this one doesn't really name sources or why they believe this to be happened. They bring up a lot of stuff that was, like headline news. Um, Kind of saying, hey, look into it. Is the DOJ looking into it? Is the FBI looking into it? Is it the SEC looking into it? Who knows? Who freaking knows? Maybe, maybe not, probably not, because that's not how the system's designed. But let's get into it. First, I'm going to read the file, and then I will go into the people in the file and how they may be interconnected with Jeffrey Epstein's world. The FBI CHS reporting document. This is dated 10/19/2020 from the field office of Los Angeles. It is file number EFTA00090314. Okay, list all present, including yourself. Do not include the CHS. This is through an encrypted messaging app. Check here if additional reporting is an ACHO. No. So source reporting. Captioned confidential human source. CHS was asked by the handling agent about the information he or she may be aware of related to improper domestic or foreign influence over the electoral process in the U.S. CHS already provided some of this information documented in the previous reports, but she has expanded on several matters. So this has already been reported, and they're expanding on it. This goes into the whole Russian interference thing from the 2016 election, right? We went over a little bit about that in the last video when we were talking about Manafort, and we went over a little bit in the Jeffrey art connection, with all of the Dimitris involved, and the Russian oligarch who knows all. I think that was a conversation between Jeffrey and Bannon. Might have been Michael Wolff, but I think it was Bannon. So that's what this is really going to go into. Let's get into it. So Harvard Law professor Alan Dershowitz, CHS, learned that Dershowitz influenced many students from wealthy families. For example, Josh and Jared Kushner were both students. Dershowitz told CHS that if he were a young man, he would be holding a stun gun as an Israeli intelligence agent. CHS believed Dershowitz was co-opted by Mossad and subscribed to their mission. CHS is still continues to communicate occasionally for Dershowitz. See previous reporting. I want to see the previous reporting. If anybody knows the file numbers for the previous reporting to this, I would love to see them. I would love to go deeper. Again, this is just a preliminary, like, on the surface deep dive. I need to put on my glasses because I can't read my computer screen. Okay, so we'll get into who these people are in a minute. But if you want to know, I'm not going to go into the Kushner family quite terribly deeply, but if you do want to know more about the Kushner family, Becca Day over on the Clock app, she has a whole playlist top-notch deep dive there, I highly suggest. So Jeffrey Epstein was represented by Dershowitz. CHS remembered that Dershowitz telling Alex Acosta, the U.S. Attorney, Southern District of Florida at the time, that Epstein belonged to both the U.S. Allied Intelligence Services, belonged to both U.S. and Allied Intelligence Services. CHS shared phone calls between Dershowitz and Epstein, during which she took notes. And after these calls, Mossad would then call Dershowitz to debrief. Epstein was close to the former Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. I can never pronounce names. I learn from reading. I read. That's what my whole channel is about, is reading. So forgive me if I mispronounce shit. And when I say this man's name, I do mean shit, because he's a piece of shit. There are so many allegations against the former Prime Minister of Israel. Anyway, I think that's why he lost to Netanyahu too, was a whole bunch of this stuff. Masha Drakova, based in Silicon Valley, has been running a firm called Day One Ventures, which is supposedly an early stage investment company. She used to be Vladimir Putin's main contact in the Russian youth movement. CHS said Drakova spoke, but Drakova did not talk about technology. Instead, she looked at CHS and said, "You know Epstein, don't you? He was a wonderful man." And that it was a crying shame what had been done to him. CHS concluded Day One Ventures was in Silicon Valley to steal technology. Okay, so it goes on to say that CHS advised Chabad, CHBAD, is doing everything it can to co-opt the Trump presidency. Chabad is basically state-sanctioned Jerusalem, and it's used by Putin to keep the Russo-Jewish oligarchs. On the day that Trump was elected president, Ivanka Trump and Jared were at the gravesite of Rabbi Shirsham. He was the leader of Chabad. We'll get into him in a little bit. Who was the most powerful rabbi in the network. Jared didn't disclose his stake in cadre because of his ties to the Russian state, NFI. CHS believed that this was the real Russian collusion story. Kushner has moved a lot of Russian investment money around. The FBI should investigate the Kushner family charities to find evidence of corruption and money laundering. Chabad routinely uses charities to launder money. Again, look into the Kushner family. They run the fucking world. Okay, sorry guys. I gotta move you because I gotta get closer to the screen to see it. My eyes are shit. Okay, so Stage has provided the attached article entitled Jim McGreevey and His Main Man by Craig Horowitz, published 9/10/2004. While the article is old and centered on Charles Kushner, it highlights and documents the deep ties the Kushner family has to Israel and their history of corrupt business practices and alleged violations of election laws. CHS stated that the FBI is serious about investigating the Kushners and their relationships with the Middle East, if they are. They should look closely at Ken Kushner, who knows everything. CHS advised Henry Kissinger introduced Charles to Cuitiankai, a Chinese ambassador to the U.S., a relationship that could have been helpful at around the same time of the introduction. Anbang was entering negotiations with the Kushners over the 666 Fifth Avenue. 666 Fifth Avenue comes up a lot in these files, and I will go over a little bit about that in a minute, but it definitely deserves a whole video of its own. Harry Tendino, Carey T, I can't say his last name, has been involved in and has developed Trump hotels and is a billionaire. He introduced himself to the Indonesian CIA. Harry speaks Indonesian. Harry bought the Beverly Hills home from Trump at an inflated price. And redacted was at Harry's house when Harry redacted that Trump told him he was going to fuck Amazon over the military contracts. CHS advised that it was the real collusion story. Trump has been compromised by Israel, and Kushner is the real brains behind the organization and his presidency. Again, I'm reading the file from the DOJ, okay? So Igor Korbatov brokered the sale of the Beverly Hills mansion. Trump acquired for $800,000 less than the market value. CHS referenced the attached article that was summarized in the matter. A small-time scan artist gave Trump a mansion for $0. Why? Published April 12, 2018 by Lance William and Matt Smith in Reveal, the Center for Investigative Reporting. Ross Dusselton, a Washington, D.C.-based attorney and consultant on financial crimes in the International Monetary Fund, said the deal included many facets that don't add up, and the deal warrants further scrutiny, and investigators should follow up on the numerous oddities and red flags that this series of transactions raises. The Finches signed the deed transferring the Beverly Hills home. The Fishes are prominent Los Angeles real estate investors and political donors. They've given more than $250,000 to GOP candidates and causes. They were guests in the White House when George W. Bush was president and accompanied him on a trip to Israel. Selma Fish, Fisch, said in a phone interview their daughter and wife of the sales broker Lisa Korbatoff is a GOP activist and the president of the Beverly Hills United School Board. Lisa is an active member of the Jewish community in Beverly Hills, and after one season on the West Coast, The Apprentice moved back to New York. Trump, however, lived in the Beverly Hills mansion. In the summer of 2009, he sold the home for $9.5 million, $800,000 less than the previous year's price, to a Swiss entity associated with the family of Ika Widjaja, Widjaja, an Indonesian billionaire financier. The sale was in cash. Trump's former lawyer, Michael Cohen, filed legal papers for the shell company that involved the mansion's purchase. He notarized the deed when Trump sold the property. Records show he didn't respond to multiple requests for comment. Okay, page 3 of 3. The CHS stated redacted Renda Tillerson, telephone number redacted. Renda is the wife of Rex Tillerson, former Secretary of State for Trump. Renda told CHS about smears in the New York Post and how Jared was running a rival State Department operation. Rex affirmed her claim. Renda was introduced to CHS by Darren Blayton. Renda and Rex both told CHS that they had been under intense surveillance. Renda told CHS she can't wait for the FBI to call her so that she can tell them everything she knows. According to, I wonder if that happened. I wonder if that's in the files. If you know, tell me, please. Let's figure this shit out together. So according to Jed Sugarman and Whitney Webb, Leon Black owns the mercenary firm known as Blackwater, which has been accused of being involved in several arms and human trafficking scandals. Black, also the CEO of Apollo, at New York Times, noted that Black inexplicably stood by Jeffrey Epstein, giving him $50 million. Apostle also lent the Kushners $184 million while the Kushner was facing the 666 Fifth Avenue disaster. See attached screenshots for reference. I want those screenshots. I haven't found them yet. They might be in the files. Tell me. They might be in the released ones too. Anyway, Elliot Brody recently pled charges related to money laundering, unregistered lobbying for the UAE. Brody previously played a former Playboy model over $1 million to stay quiet about an affair he had with her. Brody allegedly successfully lobbied to increase U.S. sanctions. I have a tear falling out of my face because my allergies suck. Anyway, Lobbied to increase U.S. sanctions on the government of Qatar. CHS advised, since Brody was reportedly the largest fundraiser for Trump, supporting the 2016 presidential election, he apparently used his access to the Trump to lobby. Joey Mowbray, telephone number redacted, has been in Brody's inner circle. CHS believed Mowbray was an unregistered lobbyist. He was one of the shiftiest people that CHS had ever encountered. He was converted to Judaism, and the CHS stated he would flip on Brody because he was a flipper. Congressman Ed Royce was close to Brody and has been trying to do shady things. Brody's wife may be a lobbyist who works with Brody, Brody. So CHS emphasized the importance of the FBI to investigate Gawker for its involvement in pushing Russian propaganda. Matt Mellon told CHS that after Gawker was destroyed, the Russian intelligence services started to use Zero Hedge Fund to influence U.S. people. Synopsis: Foreign influence on the U.S. officials by Israel, Russia, and the UAE. Okay, so starting from the top, Alan Dershowitz. Now, if you've been following anything in political news, you are very aware of this name. So I'm just going to go over a quick, brief overview of who Alan Dershowitz is. Now, he had tenure at Harvard Law, joining in '64 and retired in 2013. He defended Trump. He was OJ's appellate advisor. He negotiated Epstein's non-prosecution agreement, that sweetheart deal, as well as Mike Tyson, Patty Hearst, Julian Assange, and Harvey Weinstein. He used to be Democrat. He left the left in 24, saying Dems are anti-Jewish, and he's an iCountry defender. Now, Alex Acosta, from 2017 to 2019, he was the Secretary of Labor for Donald Trump. He was the Dean of FIU College of Law, and he was George W. Bush's U.S. Attorney for State District of Florida. He was Assistant Attorney General in Civil Rights Division, U.S. DOJ from 03 to 05. He was with Allen when Allen negotiated the 2008 sweetheart deal for Epstein. He defends that deal. Though his testimony in 25 has been called evasive and non-credible. So yeah, that's Alex Acosta. Now let's get into, like, you should already know a lot about Alex Acosta, I'm assuming. If you don't, definitely look him up. He's a shady one. So Masha Drakova, aka Masha Butcher, founder of Day One Venture. She bridges tech society through storytelling and art. It's always the arts, isn't it? Like, it's frickin' all of them. I mean, seriously, from the New York Academy of Arts to Parsons to Miramax to Nickelodeon to, it's fucking all of them. Anyway, so Day One is an investor in DuckDuckGo, among others, including Josh Kushner through Thrive Capital. He was also an investor to DuckDuckGo. They invested like $100 million. So, yeah, all of our media, including our search engines, like it's all controlled, really, by the Kushner family and people in their circle. Masha has quite the impressive resume. She was an all-Russian Olympiad in social studies in '06. She specialized in political analysis in college. At 16, she joined the Youth Democratic Antifa movement, later to be nicknamed Putin's Private Army. They operated under the guidance of Kremlin's top political strategist. Their purpose was to counter the left-wing ops, including cyber operations. By '07, she held senior roles in '09 when Bush dodged a shoe. Yeah, remember that? Yeah, she had organized that whole protest thing of the guy throwing his shoe at Bush. I've recently joked about that. Remember when this was politics? Okay, anyway. In 2014, she obtained her green card under E16, supported by Esther Dyson, who has deep ties to Russia. Again, Becca Day has a video on Esther Dyson. I'm going to get into her in a second, a little bit, not much. But they were both connected to tech. In '05, Esther was photoed with Jeffrey Epstein in Russia. Some suggest that Masha tried to connect with Peter Thiel via Jeffrey Epstein. A little side note. So Masha, her connection to Jeffrey Epstein came when her firm, and this was in 2014, when her firm M&A PR studio, Jeffrey Epstein became a client of theirs. So yeah, she was his publicist, his fixer. In 2016, her sister Victoria co-founded a webinar with JE's assistants, and the registered address matched Jeffrey Epstein's foundation. And Dyke, you know, Jeffrey Epstein's lawyer, handled the trademark for that filing. Rabbi Shearson, Scheersom. So he met with the I-State's human rights activist Yosef Abramowitz in '92, and was described as the head of the Jewish extremists, as being a Jewish extremist and an end timist. He was an Orthodox rabbi, considered to others as the most influential leader of the 20th century. He died in '94 at 92 years old, at Mount Sinai, New York. Mount Sinai, again, if you go back to my video on the art connection, has very deep ties to Jeffrey Epstein and the Dubin family. Yet another thread deserving of its own deep dive. So Trump proclaimed his birthday as Education and Sharing Day because in 1941, Shearson escaped the Nazis, fleeing to the U.S., where he had assumed leadership of the movement. So the first article that was mentioned in the file, the Jim McGreedy, that basically claims that Charles Kushner pled guilty to retaliating against filing false tax returns and false campaign finance reports, and McGreedy called Charles a kingmaker. No king. So Charles Kushner, he built an empire on real estate because they all do. Real estate, real estate, real estate. The kingmaker, Charles Kushner, he built an empire on real estate and donated millions to politicians. He was a figure in the Jewish community, contributing to causes in Israel. Bill Clinton made several appearances at Kushner functions along with Netanyahu. There was this New York governor who resigned following essay claims. At least he resigned. They're all essay claims. Anyway, he had essay claims by a staffer forcing him out of the closet. Theorists say that he placed his secret lover, an Israeli citizen, to the DHS coordinator at 100K10 a year, and Jared Kushner had introduced that. I can't confirm nor deny any of that, along with any other allegations of corruption, but this governor had deep ties and connections with Charles Kushner, and there's a lot of shady stuff there. Also, worthy of a deep dive of its own, but we're just doing a general overview for now. If there is anyone you want me to deep dive into, or anybody that I mentioned that you want me to go further into, please let me know in the comments below. So next on the list of people named in this accusation, in this FBI form, is Ken Kurson. He was a political consultant of the New York Observer from 2013 to 2017. Side note, the New York Observer is also owned by Jared Kushner. In 2020, he faced charges for cyber stalking, and DJT would pardon him in 2021. And he also attended high-profile galas, including all the people that I've mentioned before. Then we're going to get into the Chinese name. I can't pronounce them so sorry. I am incredibly uncultured. Cuitiankai. So, I mean, we really, in the files, we don't really touch much on the Chinese or connections with China. So that kind of perked my ears up a little bit. Like, it's not something we hear often. Yeah, imagine my surprise. So he was the longest ambassador to the U.S. From like 2013. Yeah, he covered Obama, Trump, and Biden, and worked with Jared Kushner as Donald Trump's senior advisor in 2017. So moving on to another name I can't pronounce. We've got Harry T. Tanoesodinbjo. So I'm just going to call him Harry T. He funded Holdings, a company, a shell, whatever, in 1989. And then he became an Indonesian businessman and politician. 26 Forbes billionaire list included his name. He developed luxury resorts with Trump Org in Indonesia and Bali and West Java. Although in developing those luxury resorts, he did work more with the Trump kids, Eric and Donald Jr. And the projects, they faced a lot of scrutiny over conflicts of interest, where Kushner was involved in the vetting political conflicts with foreign relationships. He'd attended Mar-a-Lago events, like literally as recently as 26. He's entered politics by founding his own party in Indonesia. So he's another political figurehead with deep ties. Our Igor, I kind of love that name, Igor. We always imagine him with the hump on his shoulder and everything. Anyway, Igor Gorbachev. He practiced real estate law in Beverly Hills. He brokered the sale, like we went over in the files. He brokered that the Trump Beverly Hills mansion sale. His wife is the former president of the Beverly Hills school board. We went over that. That says it. He also has social ties to Elliot Brody and involvement with the trust Omar Bongo, the former dictator of Gabon. Okay. So it was his in-laws that signed the deed for the Trump Beverly Hills mansion. But let's get into his ties with another man named Brody. So in 2016, Brody used his clout to provide intelligence to foreign officials and other dealings with the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Romania, and the Republic of Congo. He later sued Qatari officials, claiming that that everything that was said about him was all an orchestrated smear campaign, because Brody was an ISIS supporter. That claim was dismissed. In 2017, Brody used Cohen, DJT's lawyer, to pay $1.6 million in hush money to a model with whom he'd had an affair. That was mentioned in there. So Brody is implicated in a scheme where millions of dollars ended up, I don't know how they got there, in his wife's law firm's hands. Um, Brody helped to end a Justice Department investigation into a Malaysian financier who embezzled billions of dollars as well. Lots of allegations, lots of money changing hands, whether it's fair or honest or not. Probably not, because I think when we talk about it being unethical to be a billionaire, not just having that much more than anybody else, when we have people dying on the streets of hunger and not being able to receive health care for curable diseases, um, why they have so much is unethical in and of itself. But the way they become billionaires through the exploitation of labor, through these backdoor deals, and we're told that there's these laws in place that are supposed to prevent that, and they just sidestep them. They don't care. They're not going to get in any trouble. Anyway, Selma Fish, Fisch. She was an LA real estate and political donor. She donated $250,000 to the COP. She was a guest to the White House and accompanied W on vacay to the I-State. All that's already said in the file. So their daughter, Lisa, we just talked about her husband, Igor, right? So this is her daughter, his wife. Selma's the one that signed the deed on the mansion in 09. Okay. So in 08, she bought it for 10.3 million. And then later it was transferred to a shell for $0 to Donald Trump. Now, in my last video, we kind of went over how these shell companies and their $10 deals, what that really means. It's not really, it's an undisclosed amount. This one, it really was transferred to Donald Trump for $0 to this shell. And then less than a year later, Donald Trump sells this mansion for $9.5 million, like the best deal ever. How did he get this house for $0, right? So the deed, the guy that received the deed that Selma Fish signed over said his name was a mistake. Yeah, it should have never been on the deed. He should have never received the deed to that property, and Selma just kind of fucked up. And so he then transferred it to Donald Trump for $0. So where did the 950 come from, and where did it go? Huh? Where did it come from? Where did it go? So yeah, okay, it was this guy that wasn't supposed to receive this deed that transferred it back for $0. Later on, he would be affiliated with these scams with this dude Prince Jamal, whose profile and whole vibe kind of gives Homoka, stop eating my sesame cake, Tim Curry's role in Congo. Yeah, he kind of gives that vibe. Michael Cohen, like Manafort, you probably already know. He was Donald Trump's lawyer and VP of the Trump org. He was fired after the investigation into the Russian election interference. In August of 18, he pled guilty to 8 counts of fraud and campaign finance violations. Remember Stormy Daniels? Yeah, that's the guy. You know what? Trump 1.0, it seemed like a playground. It seemed like bubblegum type shit compared to what's going on today and what we're learning today through all of these file dumps and everything. Like, the way I view the world is so so different. I wrote a trauma dump novel in 2020 just to kind of process everything we had gone through in the 4 years before that, leading up to that, and also what we were going through with the pandemic and everything. I've since taken it down because it was crap. It's so niche when you're talking about a tiny period of time. But I can't even like wrap my head around all this stuff. Um, I it's so much, and I wonder how long, how many novels I'm gonna have to trauma dump into to really kind of process what's happening or what just happened when this is all said and done. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, let's get into Rex Tillerson, who was also named. So Rex served as Donald Trump's Secretary of State until 2018. Before that, he was an ExxonMobil executive and chairman from '06 to 16. Do you remember? I mean, probably not. But in '89, the Exxon Valdez oil spill, it was the most devastating oil spill in the United States. I mean, maybe I should make a video on that. Um, anyway, yeah, it's that Exxon, but he wasn't there. In '89, that was a totally different executive decision that led to that oil spill. Anyway, so Rex's wife, Renda St. Clair, so they have a Texas horse ranch called RR Ranches. And Rex testified that that the Kushner did not loop in when Jared Kushner, DJT's son-in-law, engaged in a foreign policy outside of the State Department, because Rex Tillerson was Donald Trump's Secretary of State. So basically, Jared Kushner was meeting with people and making decisions and doing things without telling Rex, right? Rex didn't run shit. It was all Jared Kushner behind Rex's name. That's what Rex is alleging. Okay. So then let's get into another name, Darren Blayton. I never heard this name before. I read this file. So he was kind of interesting to do a quick little overview on. So you guessed it, he's a venture capitalist because they all are. He's a horse enthusiast and the founder of Colt Ventures in '03. He was a 2016 advisor to the president's campaign and served as Donald Trump's transition team, as a part of Donald Trump's transition team. He invested in Rumble next to Peter Thiel. You already know Peter Thiel's the Palantir guy. Yeah, remember that weird military parade was sponsored and their name was plastered all over that Peter Thiel. So Darren has a lot of connections with JD Vance, our current vice president, through the investment into Rumble. It included Nera Capital that was co-led by JD Vance. He's also connected to Steve Bannon, who we all already know was JE's bestie, and was a big part of the Red Pill movement that JE funded Steve Bannon to spread alt-right ideology using the language of the internet. We also know that JE was a part of the founding of the poll thread on 4chan, which also led to the uprise of the incel and red pill movement. Yeah. So this guy is also friends with Steve Bannon. And he was also a Turning Point USA Advisory Council. Both investments are Darren. They invest in biotech and life sciences with emphasis on cardiac remodeling and regenerative medicine. Run by some of their investments are run by a Dr. Robert Blanton, but they're not related. Their last name is just spelled the same, and they're both out of Texas. And yeah. So anyway, so there's this guy. His name is Don Huffing. He's a Republican Texas comptroller. So this guy he purchased Zorro Ranch under a trust, of course, because they're all under the secretive trusts. Anyway, he renamed Zorro Ranch to Rancho San Rafael, and he wants to turn it into a Christian retreat. Okay. Um, but this guy, Don, he once thanked Charlie Kirk for endorsing him because Turning Point USA, Turning Point Action, endorses Don Huffington's, the owner of the former Zorro Ranch. To make it a little more interesting, so check it. So this guy, he's also backed by Ted Cruz and Riley Gaines. Anyway, he funds or invests in something called Newborn Heart Cell. They harvest baby hearts for science. And he also has connections to Stephen Bannon. Anyway, so Donny Boy, his venture capitalist firm, Hest Investments, invests in also regenerative medicine. He invests in a company that actually harvests baby hearts under, like infant hearts under 30 days old, to look into cardiac and regenerative medicine. And Darren, his companies also invest into cardiac and regenerative type medicine. Although, with the exception of like Steve Bannon and Turning Point and the fact that they invest in similar interests, they really, I couldn't find any like direct connection between the two of them. I don't know that they actually know each other. Maybe there's nothing there, but given Jeffrey Epstein's special interest, shall we say, into eugenics and baby farming, it's all just, it kind of gives me the goosebumps on my skin. It's kind of gross. It's like they're really interested in things they shouldn't be interested in, buying properties where creepy shit went on with creepy men, and apparently it makes me think that they are also creepy men doing creepy things like baby farming to harvest their hearts for rejuvenation, building the master race, eugenics, all of that, the fuck, and they're all connected to Turning Point USA, which makes me kind of wonder a little bit about them. Of course, being connected to Turning Point USA doesn't mean Turning Point USA is connected to Zorro Ranch or any like nefarious type shit there. And stem cell research, I think, is kind of a valid science area of scientific study. I don't really know the full scope of what they do in those labs, so I'm making it sound probably a lot more disturbing than it really is. I just thought that was a tidbit. So Darren has this brother, right? His name is Brett. Little fact about me: I wanted to name my firstborn child Brett. My husband was like, "No, dude." I guess he wasn't a Packers fan. I don't know. So his brother Brett served as the 12th architect of the Capitol from January 2020 to January 2023. He left after allegations of misconduct that led to his dismissal, right? The allegations included using company vehicles. He let his wife and daughter drive them and referred to it as free gas. So this free gas totaled 29,000 miles, or about $14,000 in taxpayer money. And apparently, he used his vehicle with the lights and the sirens to chase down a guy. I'm not 100% sure of the story. I think the guy was involved in a hit and run, so he was chasing down the person who was evading the scene of an accident and proceeded to identify himself as an agent. He wasn't an agent, he was an architect. Anyway, Um, and then his wife, Michelle, she used her socials to offer Capitol tours. Okay, fine. What's wrong with that? Well, this was during lockdown when the Capitol was closed to the public. Um, but he didn't face any violations, and either did she. But his final paycheck was garnished the $14,000 in gas money, so I guess it wasn't so free after all, right? So in 2024, a formal employee, guess what? Guess what she filed? Well, she didn't say it was SA. She just said it was the sexist environment under his leadership. And, I found Brett's name in the files too. I really didn't understand what I was looking at. It looked kind of like a receipt for a Gulfstream, and his name was attached. So I don't know. That might warrant further investigation. It may not. I don't know. Let me know if you want to know more about Brett or Darren or their family. I could totally go into that. If not, let's move on to Jed Sugarman, shall we? So Jed Sugarman specializes in the history of executive power and judicial independence. So Jed Sugarman, he argued that the whole thing around the 666 Fifth Avenue, which Jared Kushner owned, let me explain that real quick. Okay, so 666 Fifth Avenue, I think it used to be a Vanderbilt mansion. And I think isn't that CNN guy, the super blonde, pale one. What is his name? Anyway, he's a Vanderbilt. Anyway, I think, isn't he? Anyway, so it used to be a Vanderbilt mansion or Vanderbilt property, and Jared Kushner bought it for $1.8 billion. Now, this was before the crash in '08. We did start to go over the '08 crash in my last video. With that we talked about Cantor Fitzgerald and their selling of stocks and whatnot, how that helped lead to the '08 crash, and how Blackwater kind of came in and picked up and made made a dumb amount of money on all of our sufferings. Okay, so this was before that financial crisis. Jared bought this building for $1.8 billion, and they're office buildings, right? And he had plans to demolish it. And then the crash happened, and they were hemorrhaging money, like mad. Like they could not afford to keep this, and they were in an incredible amount of debt because of it. So in 2018, they offloaded it to Brookfield. But they still own the land. They just don't own the building. So they're basically like landlords. I don't know. But there was a lot of scandal involving the sale, and a lot of suspicions, I guess, and probably definitely deserving of its own video. I only know very tiny little bit about it. I could definitely go into that if you want me to. Otherwise, if you could lead me to anybody else that's done a deep dive into 666 Fifth Avenue, I would totally love to know more. But basically, it involves the Qataris, who own a lot of Manhattan, and the White House and more. And it definitely includes Leon Black, who kind of came in and helped bail them out, and it also involves Bannon. Because, of course, it does. Because Leon and Bannon and Les all kind of just keep coming up and coming up and coming up. And who else keeps coming up? The Kushners, of course. This world is so small and it's global, but the people involved, they're involved in everything. So anyway, Jed Sugarman, he says that that whole ordeal, that is deserving of its own video, that it posed a national security risk, and that it could provide a motive for Kushner to have a secret line to the Kremlin. and Russian bankers. And Jed kind of has a lot of concerns of there being like quid pro quos. And given Jared's connections and positions in the White House, especially if the allegations of him being kind of like a shadow representative are true, there's concerns of backdoor deals and quid pro quo type shit. And Jed kind of thinks that Jared has something to do with backing the blockade against Qatar. One other person that this informant also named was Whitney Webb. Let's talk about Whitney Webb for a second. So she's a journalist, and she's known for her research into intelligence agencies and organized crime and the military industrial complex. She spends her whole life investigating this kind of stuff, both in a historical context through modern times. In 2026, she published a 2-book series titled One Nation Under Blackmail, which explores the connections between intelligence networks leading up to Jeffrey Epstein's world. I got them from my local library. I am literally on chapter 3 of book 1. So far, it's very interesting. It's really going into organized crime back like through World War II and post World War II, Prohibition, and it's really like it's a good book so far. I'll do a book review later if you want me to. And then lastly, the thing we're going to go over is Gawker. And I normally wouldn't give this kind of stuff any kind of acknowledgement because Gawker was like a alt-right conspiracy theory kind of Q and anon propagandist type whatever. It shut down, but it really kind of catered to that rise of that incel movement, a lot of Steve Bannon type shit on there, a lot of like, I mean, just just conspiracy theory bullshit. Of course, we now know that some of that conspiracy theories was true, um, that we found through the files. But I think it's important to remember as we go through this that the keyboard warriors of the past that lived in the swamps of the internet and would kind of show their ugly little faces from time to time trolling us, um, they kind of credit themselves as memeing Donald Trump into the White House, and it's definitely kind of ground zero for this red pill, black pill uprise that we see. That's no longer just on the internet. It is geopolitical. It is affecting. We got kids on the playground that don't even have access to places like the Chans or even Tumblr, um, that are talking about like pro Hitler type shit, right? Um, and just the alt right movement in and of itself. So I really kind of started paying attention to the rise um, of that movement. I mean, I remember a lot of this stuff just from being online, but I remember being like, "Oh, this is toxic shit. I need to go back to the surface and search up some cute cat videos." Um, but after the assassination of Charlie Kirk, I really started to deep dive into that world. And then when the latest batch of files dropped, because I kept going back to that one conversation of Steve Bannon asking Jeffrey Epstein for money to support him. He was in Europe and he was going around teaching children how to use the language of the internet to spread alt-right propaganda. um, I really kind of started to put the two together, and now I'm looking at the world, and the world isn't. It's not the world I grew up in, right? I didn't sit next to um, literal neo Nazis in school, and children nowadays do, and it's no longer just in the recesses of the internet. And that is in big part because of the people in power. And it was very planned. It was, that's what they wanted. So, yeah. Anyway, that's it. I don't know what you guys think of this particular FBI intake form. Like I said, there's other. This isn't the first interview they did on this, and that kind of makes me think, well, maybe they thought it might have been credible. I don't know if there's anything more on this particular file. If you do, please let me know down below. If you want me to deep dive any deeper into anybody I've mentioned, please let me know down below. Otherwise, I'm going to come at you later this week, next week. I don't know when. I'm going to add another file. There's one more file I wanted to go down and talk about that also has to deal with following the money in regards to financial crimes and geopolitical influence, as well as I also wanted to go down the Yemen connection and Jeffrey's world and how they're connected to everything that happened in Yemen over the past 20 years. Because remember, Jeffrey Epstein had his hands in everything, right? He was involved in the Iran-Contra affair. This goes back decades and decades and decades, and it's yeah, enlightening. I don't know. I don't. Enlightening's not that word. Disturbing. For being here today. Let me know. Do you like it better if I read and then go over who the people are in the file, or if I read the file first, or if I just like in my art connection where I don't read the file, I just reference it and let you know, hey, just give you like the Cliff Notes version. I don't know. I know my content's kind of crap. I'm trying to get better. So some constructive criticism is appreciated. Anyway, thanks for being here today on Gigi Says What Now. Remember, you're valid, you are worthy, and you are loved. Bye.